Voyage.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to help you make the most of your summer with Michelob Ultra, a superior light beer worth playing for. Play for it with the guys when you're competing to see who can sink more birdies on the golf course, because winning tastes even better with Ultra on the line. Play for Ultra. Fill your fridge with Michelob Ultra this summer. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
There were 2 obituaries after Dan murdered Lynn and then killed himself. This is how Dan's obituary, which ran in the Salt Lake Tribune, referenced what happened. At the age of 51, he married the love of his life, Lynn. Dan and Lynn were true soulmates and cared very much for each other. Towards the end of the obituary, almost like a footnote, there's a line that mentions Dan was preceded in death by his wife, Lynn. Here's how Lynn's obituary, which ran in the Los Angeles Times, read: "We profoundly mourn the loss of Lynn, who died tragically and senselessly at the hands of her husband." Dan's obituary notes that his last written words as a member of the Mormon faith were, "The church is true." And that's correct. Those were his last written words. But his obituary doesn't mention those words were in the note recovered by police after the murder-suicide. I'm Dan Benamore, a true crime podcast producer. It was not lost on me that in this story, myself and the killer happened to share the same first name. Maybe it made me even more compelled to try and figure out why this happened. How did an ostensibly normal person get to a place where he committed this crime? The tragic ending of Dan and Lynn's relationship could not have had a more opposite beginning. Lynn and Dan's first meeting was practically out of a romantic movie.
My name is Marilyn Hotz. I'm going to tell the story of my best friend growing up, a lifelong friend whose name was Lynn, who was really everything. Still feels like she's my best friend. I miss her every day, but she was murdered by her husband. I wanted to tell the story because she was a vibrant, wonderful, loving woman, a beautiful woman, a funny woman, and I'm not the only one that thought she was a best friend. There were many women who thought that she was a best friend.
Some of those women are Becky, Nancy, and Kathy. We'll refer to them in shorthand as the Duff sisters.
Like, she felt like all of our best friends. Yeah. Well, I mean, she didn't seem to take to anybody that made you feel like you were less than. Right. She just made all of us feel special.
And even still, more women had this sort of extremely close relationship with Lynn.
My name is Pamela Pinheiro, and I've been a friend of Lynn's out here in California. Somewhere between 84 and 86, we met, and we were like sisters. I come from a large family, and Lynn was my maid of honor over my sisters. They're on the East Coast. Lynn was my son's godmother. She was there in the delivery room with me. she's just been a dear friend for, many, many years.
Nancy, Kathy, and I all lived together in Marina Del Rey in our single years. And we lived at Oakwood Apartments, but it was like a singles kind of place to live. So we had this huge pool, and every week we would meet new friends because it was kind of a transient place. People would move in and out. Well, one week we met Lynn at the pool. And we all went, from that moment of meeting her, we all were a group. And she included all of us and vice versa. So in that time, we got to know a lot of Lynn's boyfriends.
So she was always trying to meet the right guy. She was eager to find a partner, but yet kind of at this point later in life, sort of hoping for the right one, trying to find the right one that kind of hit all the criteria. She was in her late 40s, I think. She met Dan on her birthday, sitting at the bar waiting for her friends to show up, and they were stuck on the 405. And she said to the bartender, "You know what? My friends are going to be late. It's my birthday. I want a martini." The bartender gave her a martini and said, "That gentleman at the other side of the bar bought it for you." So she waved to him and thanked him. And when her friends came, I think she stopped to talk to him a bit, and she gave him her card, which she thought was very bold of her. She didn't typically do that. I remember her saying to me, somehow, for some reason, I just gave him my card. And then he took his card out, and his card said the address was the same address of the town, almost literally the street that she lived on. And she took this, she thought this was like a sign that, this guy, finally this is the guy that's going to do everything. And he was a handsome guy. He was adopted as a kid, and I had been adopted, I think, adopted by a Mormon family, but what his background was, you didn't know, but he looked Italian, so that sort of suited her family.
To understand Lynn and why Dan looking Italian might have been so important for her, you have to understand where she came from. The same place her lifelong friend Marilyn came from.
So I wanted to tell the story because it relates to sort of how we were raised in some way. We went to Catholic school all our lives. We were raised in New Jersey in a very traditional Italian kind of neighborhood. And the young girl's dream of finding a perfect husband, all these things kind of fit in a way that created a mentality for her that made her stay and want to try harder and be compassionate and try to look at the bright side and be hopeful in a relationship that was really beginning to show real signs that she needed to get out. The first time I met Lynn was on the playground of my school. She and I were in the same grade but in different classes, so I didn't really know her. I only knew of her. She was kind of a tall, brunette, pretty young girl. And I saw her on the playground at lunch recess fighting with a few boys. There was a couple of kids there, and it was a curious thing. And I could hear her yelling, but I didn't know what she was saying. And when I got up to her, I saw that she was fighting with them because they were kicking an injured bird. And she was calling them names, an idiot, and this and that. And she made them stop and went down and picked up the little bird and took it over to the nun who was the playground monitor. And she told her, you need to find me a shoebox or a box. I want to take this bird home with me. And so she did, and she named it Petey, and she nursed the bird back to health. But at that moment, I sort of just admired her and became her friend when I saw her do that. I think we were in the new building, so that was 6th grade. 10, 11, something like that. And then after that, we became fast friends. We were cheerleaders in grammar school together, went to the same high school. We did everything together. She was, my partner in crime and everything. We went to an all-girls Catholic high school. We were sort of the troublemakers a little bit in school. We went to the same college. We were sort of the disco years. We partied together quite a bit. We went down to the Jersey Shore and dated the surfers and just had a really fun time. We had a great youth together. We went to Ramapo, which was a local commuter college. It was like an alternate school, so returning women, a lot of gay and homosexual, lesbian clubs. Coming from a Catholic, all-girls Catholic school, it was an excellent scene. It sort of, woke us up into a lot of fun things, and we had a great time at this school. It was very telling pretty early on, I think, in some ways about her relationships. She dated a boy, but when she got to high school, she had a boyfriend named Jack. They dated for a while. He eventually broke off with her, and she was heartbroken. She had a Jack book that she kept where she wrote every day, and, girls would write, Mrs. Jack so-and-so, she did that all over pages. So she always was sort of, she showed signs then, which I even thought then was peculiar, of sort of like languishing in this heartbreak, this. She never got over him really in high school, always wanted him back, would be heartsick about a lot of the boys that she dated. We went to college. She had a few long-term boyfriends. She was never short of boyfriends, but usually it started to turn out that it would be the guys that were into her she wasn't that into, and the ones that she liked weren't that into her. That was pretty much a theme all her life.
Lynn did not have a type for guys. If there was anything she didn't have, was a type. She had a mixture. I mean, one guy she met was an artist, lived in a loft, and from head to toe was covered with tattoos. That's right. Remember him?
Yeah.
And
Tattoo guy.
Tattoo man, yeah. But he was nobody either any of us would have dated, but he was a little crazier and wild. She dated him for 2 or 3 years, yeah. And he was crazy about her, but she realized that her main thing was she wanted to get the approval of her mom. It was a very big deal. That was always the story, is that she was constantly
Searching for somebody that loved her for herself and was a nice person.
And she had one of her funniest lines was in her thick New Jersey accent. She says, "I loathe every man I've ever loved." And she did. After she'd break up with them, she was like, "Oh,
what was I thinking?
Why didn't you stop me?" She was always blaming all of us for trying. We would always try to say, "Lynn, really?"
One of the nicest men she dated was a black guy. The family certainly didn't approve of him at the time.
Adolphus.
Yeah, Adolphus. And we're like, "Are we ever going to meet Adolphus?" And she said, "Yeah, But I think she protected him. She didn't, because she knew that her family had already said, "Don't even think about it."
Her parents were very traditional Italian. They had moved to our town from Brooklyn, which a lot of Italians did, to get out into the New Jersey country. And it was a family that was very traditionally tied to the Italian thing. So it was the mother was a stay-at-home mom. Her mother was the best cook. Everything she turned out on a nightly basis was better than anything I've ever eaten. But her mother didn't have girlfriends. Her mother more or less stuck with her sister-in-law and her sisters, that kind of thing. For instance, my mother knew her for 20 years, and I don't think they ever had a cup of coffee together, that kind of thing. Very family-oriented. No one really in the house except the family. Her father worked in New York City. took the bus home, which left him off at the door each day. I don't know, traditional Italian is as best I can put it.
It was Marilyn who started an exodus of our friends from New Jersey to Los Angeles.
Immediately after college, I kind of, on a whim, moved to LA. I think, I was supposed to graduate the next day. I didn't even go to my graduation. And I remember sitting on the couch in my house in New Jersey with my close friends saying, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And I didn't know really why. I was just sort of led from my chest that I had to go out to LA. And then subsequently, all of those that were sitting on my couch wound up going to LA too. So we all eventually made it out here. I was here for a year, and then Lynn followed me out. And we lived at the Oakwood Apartments on Sepulveda in West LA.
In LA, Lynn did eventually meet a man that she married prior to meeting Dan.
She got married late and was almost, the guy was sort of almost inconsequential. She wanted to get married because it was the time all her friends were married. She met this young guy who was a nice enough guy. She sort of married him. I think she just really wanted to have the dress and have the big wedding in Beverly Hills. It was kind of foolish. He was a nice enough guy, but again, he was somebody that I don't think she really didn't love him. She liked him enough and thought he'd fit, more or less. So she was married for just a few years.
She decided, and she took him back to New Jersey to meet the family, that he was appropriate. Yeah, he was from a nice family, the whole thing, had a good job, cute guy, loved Lynn. And so... But we knew we're like,
Wasn't crazy about it.
We're like, really? You want to get married? You're only 29, 28 or 20.
Right, yeah.
And she's like, I'd rather be married and divorced by 30 than to not be married at all. And
We're like, that is not good.
and we're like, that fantasy of hers came true.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I mean, it was like, she said, why did you guys not stop me?
Like
And we were like, we took her out more times and said, Lynn, you can back out just because you have a wedding plan. You do not have to do this. And it kind of, that's how set the stage for maybe a not so solid marriage.
Yeah.
But he was and still apparently crazy about her. You never got over Lynn.
Probably.
And Marilyn recently met up with him, weirdly enough, and he still talked about Lynn so much, and I don't think he had heard what happened to her, but he just, he still had so much love for her, and he still was so hurt. He was just like, I bet, what did I not do?
The way she was raised, this sort of like always questioning her choices about everything. Her mother used to use an expression, Lynn, what do you have, a fart in your brain? Or always kind of ridiculing the way she thought about things. Crazy time, I guess. But always questioning her thinking. So I think she always doubted her judgment about a lot of things. That played in with it somehow too. I'm not sure how. But anyway, she had a few relationships. They would get sarcastic. They would argue. The sarcasm would go too far. It might be funny at first, and then someone would get hurt. That was sort of the theme in all the relationships she had.
After a challenging history in her love life, meeting Dan seemed like the happy ending for Lynn.
So when she met Dan, it was kind of I think it was a chance meeting. She was meeting somebody else for drinks, and they didn't show up, and he was meeting somebody for drinks, and they didn't show up. So they ended up sitting at the bar next to each other and start talking, and she was smitten by him. She just said, I finally think I met the right one. And my husband by this time now we were all married, and my husband really loved him. We went to Hawaii together, they golfed together.
We thought it was a perfect match.
We did.
We were very excited for her because she seemed like she was really in love.
We used to do our holidays together. And I thought Dan was a nice guy. He had a good job. He was pleasant, and he was handsome, and she was happy with him.
She was all into it and certain that it was, meant to be. And somehow I don't know who called who the other first, but they began to date. And quite seriously, they were both making good money. They both had, they both at this point owned some nice condos at the beach and going back and forth to each other's places and traveling for work and all that sort of thing. So things were kind of kicked off in a nice way. And he definitely hit all the, right marks or whatever, the checklist, I should say.
Whatever Lynn thought when Dan came along, it was from years of experience of her parents not approving. And we were so happy for her because we were like, we all scratched our heads afterwards, like, how could we have been so wrong? Yeah. And her mother loved him. That was the big deal. Her mother was almost flirtatious with him. She said, my mom, she gets nervous when they go back there. She's so coquettish around Dan.
Love it.
And he was so much fun.
Dan hit all the marks. This was the guy that was going to really please her family, especially. And for some reason, that was really important to her. And her mother, I think at the time was just going through cancer, having cancer. And so her mother more or less was feeling like, oh, thank God I can, I don't have to worry about you. There was that component too.
We went to Hawaii with them. We went on to dinner with them several times in a row. And he was definitely charming and caring and funnier than heck, and made Lynn laugh so much.
A theme that would emerge in talking to people about this story was women who were friends of Lynn setting their husbands up to be friends of Dan. One of those husbands is Rick Peltz. His wife was another one of Lynn's best friends.
My name is Rick Peltz. I was married to Cheryl in the year 2000, and one of Cheryl's best friends was Lynn. And I met Lynn, I think at the end of 2000 or early 2001. And I met Dan as well. I think we went on a date basically together, the four of us. And that was the first time I met Lynn and Dan. Well, I met Cheryl I moved to LA in 2000, met her in February 2000. We married in November of 2000. And she had season tickets to the Mark Taper Theater in Los Angeles with Lynn. And that was really that's how I got to know Lynn. Is they had 4 tickets. So Cheryl and I would go meet Lynn and Dan, and we'd go to the theater. We'd always go to happy hour before the theater. And I can tell you there's a couple times we didn't make the theater. We had so much fun. But always had a great time when I first met Lynn and Dan.
Marilyn even had a solo dinner with Dan.
I was eager to meet him. I lived at the time back in New Jersey. I was raising my children. I also was going through a health issue at the time. I didn't live far from where his headquarters was, so he was in town. He took me to dinner to meet me. I met him. Just he and I went to dinner. He was very sympathetic about what I was going through and very nice to me and telling me how much he loved Lynn. And as I say, he was a good-looking guy. And it just, I was really pleased. I was really pleased with him. Really thought this was great. I think he was a charming guy. It's not like he, when I look back at it, I would have to say this was when he was in a good place. I mean, he was drinking then. I don't think that I saw, but somewhere down the line, shortly after they're dating for a while, do they realize that they both perhaps drink too much. They've met, they're going out all the time. She likes her martinis. I suppose he likes his too, or whatever.
When we'd go out to dinner, I mean, it was, there were cocktails involved. There was always nice, free-flowing conversation. But I didn't really notice a lot of any issues between them while we were together with them. But I did notice that Dan's, I would say, a little bit on the aggressive side of his conversation the more he drank. And that came into play, a couple times when we were out to dinner. I know there were a couple issues, and Cheryl and I, we discussed a couple things, and the temper of Dan came up a couple times, where he was a little bit on the abrasive side. I know when he had a couple cocktails in him, he got a little bit on the verbal side, and I know that was a concern. And Cheryl had shared that with me, that they were working their way through that.
And then things started to change a little bit. You could see a side of him that was aggressive, and alcohol was involved. And I remember an incident. My son was about 3 years old, and we were at Lynn's place. Dan and Lynn weren't married at the time, and Dan came in, and he had been drinking, and he was using language, vulgar language, and Lynn said, there's a kid here, don't talk like that. And he continued to talk like that, and then he got enraged, and she argued with him as well, and then he took off. And I said to her, please promise me that you will not argue with that man if he's been drinking. That was terrible, and it didn't go anywhere having that conversation, having an argument with him at that time. Wait until the next day or when he's sober to have a conversation. But Lynn was a compassionate person that was always kind and caring to everyone. I think every boyfriend she ever had in her life, she was still friends with after they broke up. She just didn't have a bad bone in her body. And she always, I wouldn't say she mothered people, but she was always compassionate and understanding and empathetic, and could see why people were the way they were, with a mean streak.
I got to like Dan. I mean, when I first met Dan, we were real good friends. We golf. That's the one thing we had in common. And I remember one time he was coming out, and we were going to go play in Simi Valley at one of the courses up there. And he said, I'll come pick you up at like 10 in the morning or whatever. So he came to pick me up. And he came in, and I said, are you ready to go? He said, no, not till I get a cocktail. And I go, damn, it's like 10 in the morning. He goes, no, I got to have a screwdriver. And he did. That was his comfort. He definitely needed alcohol. And then when we got to the course, I mean, there wasn't a time that I don't think the cart girl ever passed us without him getting a cocktail. So, and he would say that, my back is bothering me. I take these pills to kind of ease up, and the alcohol kind of eases up on the pain and everything. And I did know from the beginning that he was suffering from back issues. And so I don't know if the combination of the alcohol or the drugs made it easier for him, but he definitely was very dependent on both. Dan was who he was, and it was up to Lynn to decide whether she wanted to move forward with that relationship or not. And I never really got involved with that, but I would hear some comments from Cheryl about she's just a little bit concerned, maybe a little possessive, maybe a little, maybe not the nicest to her at all times. I saw very little changes in the way he was when he was out with us. So you knew that he was going to get a couple cocktails. He would have a little bit of edge to him. When I played golf with him, I knew there'd be cocktails. On the golf course, to me, he was nothing but friendly and cordial to everybody. He was happy and he was feeling good, but he was in no shape usually after golf to drive home. I'd always be driving. But I kind of knew that was the pattern, so I paced myself. I couldn't put myself in his care because it would just deteriorate as the day was going on. So I managed what I was doing. Anytime we would golf, he would come over, I would pick up his fees. And anytime I went golfing with him, he would pick up the fees. So money was never an issue. He was always generous, and, a lot of, he had an expense account, so that's where he would shoot it off to.
Dan's obituary noted that he worked as a salesman for companies like Maxell, Fuji, and Ampex.
He really didn't share any of his personal life at that point. We talked a lot of golf. We talked a lot of sports. He traveled a lot, so we would share, and I did as well. So we'd share travel stories, but golf was really our conversation at that point.
Rick was one of numerous husbands who got paired off with Dan through Dan's wife, Lynn. Another is Hank.
Well, my name is Hank Scheinberg. Lynn and my wife, Becky, have been friends for many, many, many years. And when she got together with Dan, I met Dan. So I met Dan because of Lynn. And I think we all got together one night for dinner or whatever. And that was my introduction to Dan. I liked him. I always liked him. He was a good guy, had a nice sense of humor. He was a sport. We played golf together a few times and, had drinks or a little lunch or something afterward. And, he didn't hesitate to chip in or buy anything. I have no recollection of him being a cheap guy. He was good company. He was a good sportsman out there on the golf course where there's always a lot of, give and take going back and forth, kidding each other and one thing or another. And Dan was really wonderful company. I spent years in the service. It was used to guys. I saw 16 years on Wall Street, which was really all male at that time. And Dan was, we were just guys talking, and I never found him offensive or anything else. If he had an edge, he might have, but we all just were kidding around. I liked him, and so I was truly shocked at what transpired.
The way the relationship sort of takes off from there is they're sort of living this typical LA life. They're maybe feeling like, oh, we're going out drinking too much. We should cut back. Let's do it together. We can do this. Let's get fit. She was a big gym rat. I think she got him motivated to do some of that too. At this point, he was still physically well. They decide that they both decide to stop drinking completely, and with that begin to look at LA and what they're into, and maybe we should move somewhere else. I think if this was a time where they both had challenges trying to sell their condos, and his was particularly hard to sell. I think they ultimately decided, he thought, let's go to Utah, let's go to Salt Lake City. That's where his children and now grandchildren were. I think he thought, it'd be a better life. We could go and get a big house, and we could get jobs there easy enough. And hey, we're from LA, so we can sort of do anything. Kind of, we'll take the place by storm. He's about the same age, maybe a few years older than her. So he's like in his late 40s. He was raised Mormon, but I know it's around the time where her mother is obviously dying. Her mother was, they were too ill for her to even come to the wedding, so she decided to have a wedding in Las Vegas, just get a quick marriage, because her mother, quote unquote, just wants to die in peace knowing that you're settled, okay?
So Lynn and Dan would be married in Las Vegas. Their marriage record with Clark County in Nevada lists their marriage date as April 11th, 2003. Dan would go on to murder Lynn 4 years later. No one could have known at the time, but in hindsight, their wedding would offer some clear indications of the issues in their relationship. A wedding that was described to me by everyone I spoke to who attended it as the most bizarre wedding they had ever been to. And you'll hear exactly why everyone interviewed for this podcast emphasized how strange the wedding was. Because we were able to digitize the wedding video. That's next time. My Best Friend's Killer is a production of Voyage Media. The series is produced by Nat Mundell, Robert Midas, Dan Benamore, and Caitlin Brown. Executive produced by Marilyn Hotz. Reported, written, and lead produced by Dan Benamore. Edited, sound designed, and mixed by Nick Misiti. Original music by Derlis Gonzalez. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you're listening, and subscribe now for future episodes.